There is a strange and quiet epidemic spreading through the modern world, and it has nothing to do with a virus. It does not show up on blood tests or brain scans. No pharmaceutical company is racing to cure it because, frankly, it is far too profitable to leave untreated. The epidemic is this: millions of people waking up every single morning inside climate-controlled rooms, checking glowing screens before their eyes have even adjusted to daylight, commuting through steel corridors to sit inside fluorescent-lit boxes, performing tasks they cannot explain to their own children, earning money they immediately convert into objects designed to become obsolete, and then returning home too exhausted to feel anything at all. And somewhere beneath all of that routine, beneath the promotions and the mortgage payments and the curated social media identities, there is a whisper, a faint, almost inaudible voice asking a question we have become terrified to sit with. Is this it? Is this what being human was supposed to feel like? In 1991, a woman named Marlo Morgan published a book that, regardless of every controversy that has surrounded it since, held a mirror up to that whisper and refused to look away. The book was called Mutant Message Down Under, and whether we read it as literal memoir or philosophical parable, which is precisely how we will engage with it today, its diagnosis of our collective condition remains almost unbearably relevant. To understand why this book exists at all, we need to understand the kind of person who writes it. Marlo Morgan was not an anthropologist. She was not a spiritual guru perched on some mountaintop. She was, by her own account, a middle-aged American woman entangled in the ordinary machinery of Western life. A woman who had chased success in the way we are all taught to chase it, through credentials and commerce, and the accumulation of things that are supposed to signal arrival. And yet, arrival never came. There was always another rung on the ladder, always another purchase that promised fulfillment and delivered only a brief dopamine flicker before the emptiness crept back in. Her journey to Australia, her claimed encounter with a tribe of Aboriginal people who called themselves the real people, was born not from academic curiosity but from a kind of spiritual desperation. It was the act of someone who had followed every instruction modern civilization had given her and still found herself profoundly lost. And that origin matters, because it tells us something essential about the book's real function. This is not a travel guide, it is a confession. It is one mutant's attempt to articulate what went wrong with the rest of us. The word mutant is where the entire philosophy of the book crystallizes. In the worldview Morgan attributes to the real people, they do not see themselves as primitive or underdeveloped. Quite the opposite. They see themselves as the original blueprint, the unaltered design. It is us, the ones who built cities and stock markets and nuclear weapons, who have mutated. We have deviated from the source code of what it means to be a human being on this earth. We have mutated our food until it no longer nourishes. We have mutated our relationships until they are transactional. We have mutated our sense of time until we are perpetually either regretting the past or anxious about the future, never inhabiting the only moment that actually exists. And here is the part that stings. We have mutated our understanding of success until it has absolutely nothing to do with inner peace, with community, with the ability to walk barefoot on the earth and feel genuinely, cellularly alive. There is a moment in the book where the tribe reflects on the people of the modern world and observes, mutants have something in their life they call insurance. They do not trust enough to think divine oneness will provide for their needs. Sit with that for a second. Strip away whatever theological framework you do or do not subscribe to, and look at the raw psychological truth embedded in that observation. We have built entire industries, trillion-dollar industries, around the fundamental premise that the future is something to be feared, that existence itself is a threat to be mitigated, that without a safety net made of money, we are falling. The real people, as Morgan portrays them, do not operate from that assumption. They operate from trust. From a radical, almost incomprehensible faith that if they live in alignment with the earth and with each other, what they need will come. And before we dismiss that as naive or romanticized, let us ask ourselves something genuinely uncomfortable. Has our insurance, our savings accounts, our gated communities, our alarm systems, has any of it actually made us feel safe? Or has it simply given us a more sophisticated vocabulary for our anxiety? Think about this through a modern analogy. Imagine being in the center of one of the largest cities on the planet. Tokyo, New York, London, it does not matter. You are surrounded by 8 million people. The sidewalks are packed. The trains are full. The restaurants have waiting lists. And yet you feel, in the most bone-deep way possible, completely and utterly alone. You could scream and people would simply step around you. You could cry and someone might film it. You are hyper-connected digitally and absolutely severed spiritually. You have 500 friends on a platform and not a single person you could call at 3 in the morning to say that you are not okay. This is the mutant condition. This is what Morgan is diagnosing. Not a lack of resources, but a catastrophic surplus of the wrong ones. We have optimized for everything except the things that actually matter. We have data on our sleep cycles, but no rest. We have fitness trackers, but no real embodiment. We have communication technology that spans the globe, and an epidemic of loneliness that the World Health Organization now classifies as a public health crisis. The real people, in Morgan's telling, have none of our technology. They carry nothing. They own nothing. They walk across a desert with no shoes, no GPS, no bottled water, and they are, by every measure that counts, more alive than we are. One of the most psychologically piercing elements of the book is how the tribe relates to identity. In the world Morgan describes, the real people do not receive permanent names at birth. Instead, their names change throughout their lives to reflect who they are becoming. A person's identity is not a fixed label stapled to them by parents or institutions. It is a living, breathing, evolving expression of their soul's current chapter. Now compare that to what we do. We are given a name, a nationality, a religion, a socio-economic bracket, and a set of expectations before we can even hold our own heads up. By the time we are old enough to ask who we really are, we are already buried under so many layers of assigned identity that the question itself feels dangerous. We do not grow into ourselves. We grow into the selves that were prepared for us. And when those selves do not fit, when the career feels hollow, when the relationship feels performative, when the religion feels inherited rather than felt, we do not question the system, we medicate. We numb, we scroll, we consume, and the mutant machine keeps running. There is another line from the book that cuts particularly deep. The real people express the idea that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, this idea is not unique to Morgan's book. It has been attributed to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and echoed across countless wisdom traditions. But the context in which it appears in this narrative, spoken by people who live without walls, without clocks, without mirrors, gives it a weight it does not carry in a self-help seminar. When a person who has never seen a shopping mall tells you that the spirit is primary and the body is the vehicle, it lands differently than when it is printed on a motivational poster above someone's desk in a corporate office. The real people do not theorize about spiritual existence. They live it. Every meal is a ceremony. Every step is a prayer. Every interaction with another living being, human or animal or plant, is conducted with the awareness that all of it is sacred, all of it is connected, and none of it belongs to anyone. And this is where we need to be careful, because the temptation here is to romanticize. The temptation is to say that we should all abandon our lives, throw away our phones, and walk into the wilderness. That is not the message. That kind of reactionary fantasy is just another form of escapism, another mutant impulse dressed in spiritual clothing. The real invitation of this book is far more subtle and far more demanding. It is not asking us to become the real people. It is asking us to examine, with ruthless honesty, which parts of our mutant existence are actually serving our humanity and which parts are slowly, quietly killing it. It is asking us to look at our calendars and notice how little time we spend in silence. It is asking us to look at our relationships and notice how much of our communication is performative rather than genuine. It is asking us to look at the way we eat, the way we move, the way we breathe, and recognize that we have outsourced nearly every natural human function to a machine or an app or a corporation. The philosophical breakthrough the book offers is not a rejection of modernity, but a recalibration. The real people are not anti-technology because they have made some ideological choice. They simply never needed it because their relationship with the earth and with each other was never broken in the first place. Our relationship was broken, and we used technology to patch the wound instead of healing it. We feel disconnected from nature, so we watch nature documentaries in high definition. We feel disconnected from our bodies, so we buy wearable devices that tell us what our bodies are doing because we can no longer feel it ourselves. We feel disconnected from meaning, so we consume content, hours and hours of content, searching for someone else's words to articulate the void we are too afraid to name on our own. The healing, if it is possible, begins not with grand gestures, but with almost embarrassingly simple acts. Walking outside without a destination. Sitting in silence without calling it meditation so that it becomes another item on a productivity checklist. Eating something that grew from the ground and actually tasting it. Looking at another human being, really looking, not past them, not through them, not at the image they are projecting, but at them. The real people would call this returning to what is real. We might call it waking up. What Morgan's parable also exposes, perhaps unintentionally, is the violence of our comfort. We think of comfort as benign, as something earned and deserved. But there is a particular kind of comfort that functions as an anesthetic. When we are so comfortable that we never encounter friction, we also never encounter growth. When the temperature is always controlled, we lose our ability to adapt. When food is always available, we lose our relationship with hunger and therefore with gratitude. When entertainment is always accessible, we lose our tolerance for boredom. And boredom, as any psychologist will tell you, is one of the most fertile grounds for creativity and self-reflection. The real people walk through a desert. They feel the heat. They feel the thirst. They feel the danger. And because they feel all of it, fully and without resistance, they also feel the joy, the wonder, the profound miracle of being alive with an intensity that most of us have not experienced since childhood. We have traded intensity for convenience, and we have convinced ourselves it was a good deal. There is something else worth sitting with, and it has to do with death. The real people, as depicted in this book, do not fear death the way we do. They do not build elaborate avoidance systems around mortality. They do not pretend it is not coming. They acknowledge it openly, refer to it as a transition rather than an ending. And because of this, they live with a freedom that is almost alien to the modern mind. We, on the other hand, have constructed entire civilizations around the denial of death. Our anti-aging industries, our obsession with legacy, our frantic accumulation of wealth and status, so much of it, when we strip away the surface, is just a sophisticated way of screaming into the void, "I was here. I mattered. Please do not forget me." The real people do not need to scream. They know they matter, not because of what they produce or what they own, but because they exist. Because existence itself, temporary and fragile and wild, is enough. So where does this leave us, sitting here in our mutant world with our mutant habits and our mutant anxieties? It leaves us, I think, in a place of honest discomfort, which is precisely where all real transformation begins. This book does not offer a 5-step program. It does not promise enlightenment. It simply says, look at how far we have drifted from the shore of our own humanity. Look at the price we have paid for progress. Look at what we have called civilization and ask whether a world that produces this much loneliness, this much depression, this much ecological destruction, this much spiritual poverty, can truly be called civilized. And then, in the asking, something small but irreversible begins to shift. We do not need to walk into the Australian outback to find what the real people found. We do not need to renounce anything. We simply need to remember. Remember that beneath the job title and the credit score and the social media profile, there is something ancient and unbreakable and real. Something that was there before we were given a name and will be there after the name is forgotten. The desert in this book is not just a landscape. It is a metaphor for the stripped-down, undecorated truth of what we are when everything non-essential is removed. And the terrifying, beautiful, profoundly comforting secret at the center of that desert is this. When everything is removed, What remains is not nothing. What remains is everything that ever actually mattered, and it has been waiting for us, patiently, silently, with the kind of trust that no insurance policy could ever replicate, all along.